Welcome back to the PS Pub. I'd consider myself a little bit more than casual of a fan when it comes to professional wrestling, specifically like the WWE and everything. I took most of 2024 off, but jumped back in after Raw's debut on Netflix. Originally, I had planned on posting this before Mania this year, but it didn't end up happening. So you can just see how long in advance I've been planning this particular video, but you know, SummerSlam just happened, so there's no time like the present to jump into WWE All Stars, as we continue to ponder what fate lies in store for the WWE. Now, at the time of me recording this, SummerSlam hasn't actually happened yet, so I don't know as of yet what's happened at SummerSlam, whether or not we know the injury with Rollins was real, and I just hope, as I sit here and say this now, that they are doing something with his new stable, but I digress. Anyway, I mentioned in my previous video that it was through the process of one of my previous employments to a wrestling YouTube channel that I learned about this game, and it was because of that experience that I gave the console ports a try. As well as you should if you haven't, because the game is great. So I think it's awesome in a way that I'm going to be covering the PSP game here on my channel. So since their branding is all over modern WWE now, I'm going to go with a Prime today as opposed to any sort of alcoholic beverage as we look at WWE All Stars.
And we're underway. Let's see how this unfolds, folks. Oh my God, you just smashed him. It's becoming pretty clear that he spent some long hours in front of the bag.
WWE All Stars released on March 29th, 2011 and was developed by Subdue Software. Who is Subdued Software, you may ask? Well, they were owned by THQ, and WWE All Stars was the only game the software developer made, as only a few short years after THQ would shut down, and so would this developer. After playing the game, and I guess this is a minor spoiler here, but it is pretty sad, as I think they did a good job capturing the spirit of the bigger brother versions on console. It isn't one-to-one, mind you, but given the limitations Subdued Software had to work with, I think they did a good job with the title, and it would have been cool to see what else they could have made after this. The only sales figures I could find was on VG charts, and it looks like the game sold a combined total across all platforms as 1,500,000 copies, which, however, for comparison's sake, I looked up the other major WWE game at the time entitled WWE SmackDown vs. Raw 2011, and it sold more than double at 3,500,000 copies for all systems, so take from that what you will. But still, I imagine THQ shutting down was the big deciding factor on if this game ever had a sequel or anything like that planned. Whether or not you prefer the more realistic take on the WWE video games, I do admire that they went with an art style here and really went for it, making it look awesome in the process. Now, I do want to say up front that unfortunately, I won't be able to show you any of the music in the game as it's all copyrighted by the WWE. But just a quick mention that all the music is iconic for a reason. Jim Johnston is a legend, and if for some reason you haven't heard any of these famous songs, do yourself a favor, go listen to them even if you're not a wrestling fan, because they're awesome and some of them might just turn you into a fan. Anyway, digressing here a bit, but the presentation of the game is excellent. All of the menus pop and look great with bright, vibrant colors, effects, and everything. They really went all out to distinguish this game from the SmackDown vs. Raw games, and I think it works great even when just looking at the menus. When we look at the graphics and core gameplay itself, this continues to shine through as the product hits on all fronts, and it carries a consistency in all aspects, including the game models. The over-exaggerated characters give this a more cartoony look that works well with the over-the-top moves presented in the game. Everything just fits so well together cohesively. Plus, despite being on handheld, graphically, the game is very impressive looking, and with how big and detailed the models are, it runs better than you would expect it to run. Sure, they aren't anything super great if you're playing this via emulation on a flat screen monitor, but for the time and on handheld, these do look pretty good. Not to mention every character has all their signature moves and they all look great. We also get Randy Orton's punt as one of his specials, which I think is awesome. This all gets rounded out with the likes of good old JR and the King on commentary. Like I said in my video talking about PSP fighters, I still think the console ports are the definitive way to play this one, but this is no slouch either and worthy of your time when we get into the gameplay mechanics.
I've been watching this kid week in and week out, and he seems to be impressing me every time I see him. Drew McIntyre just seems to be taking all the right... Drives him head first with the pile driver. He's in rare form tonight.
If you've never played a wrestling game, their setup reminds me a bit of Arena Fighters, but slowed down with a focus on grappling and some rhythm. The Arena Fighter comparison is only in terms of the freedom to move around the arena for an attack and the isometric view of the camera. What separates this game from, say, the 2K or SmackDown vs. Raw games is less focus on simulation and more of an emphasis on over-the-top characters, moves, and the way everything looks and feels. The WWE formula, but dialed up to 11 or even a 12 at points with this title. There are 30 characters total on the roster, not including the create a character slot. Each character also have alternative ring gear that you will need to unlock in order to use. And these outfits can be unlocked by taking your character through the Path of Champions mode, which is like the pseudo arcade mode, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Still, we've got plenty of legends, and technically enough time has passed now where even the quote-unquote younger generation are certified legends in their own right, for the most part. Superstars like John Cena, CM Punk, and Kofi Kingston are able to grapple with the likes of Hulk Hogan, Ricky Steamboat, Stone Cold, Bret Hart, and The Undertaker. Hell, even just naming those few, I'm leaving off greats like The Rock, Triple H, Randy Orton, Roddy Piper, Jake the Snake, etc, etc, etc. So you get the gist. The roster here is pretty great for the time, in my personal opinion, having a decent amount of legends as well as quote-unquote new and up-and-comers at the time.
He's starting up the...
Gameplay-wise, square is your quick strike button, which sort of acts like your light attack. Triangle is your strong strike, which is self-explanatory. You also have a quick lockup with the X, which is used for quick grabs, which allow you to perform quicker lockup attacks. They aren't as strong as the circle button strong grabs, but they keep the pace going and allow you to maintain a faster pace and stay in control against your opponent. Strong grabs are, as the name suggests, stronger grab moves that you can pull off. You can run by pressing R, but keep in mind this will drain your stamina just a little bit at a time. You'll have access to counters when you hold the L button and press in tandem with the corresponding face button. For example, counter grab, you're going to press L and X here. Each character has their own signature and finisher moves. Signature moves are strong grab style moves. Under your character's health, you can see a bar segmented into 3 sections. When you fill a segment up, you'll see a star pop up which gives you access to a signature by pressing circle and triangle together or square and X together. You'll know you've done this correctly when you see these swirling lines appear on your character. These moves are flashy and over the top and do significant damage to your opponent while filling your finisher gauge even more so. Your character's ultimate attack or finisher is relegated to the F bar next to the character portraits, which stands for finisher. Once you fill the blue bar all the way up, you'll be able to use the character's finisher to do a ton of damage on your opponent by pressing L in tandem with square and X, which after this point pretty much sets yourself up to win the match in most circumstances. This is just a high overview here, as you can obviously climb the turnbuckle for aerial assaults as well as pick up weapons and grab them from under the rings. There are 3 difficulties in WWE All Stars, starting with the easiest, which is Rookie. Contender is medium, and All-Star is your hard mode. I stayed on Contender throughout my playthrough, as there were times where I got a decent amount of challenge, but I also got absolutely wailed on, especially in the Tornado tag matches. So I felt that Contender was a fair difficulty for me in this game. And just as an aside, I don't play a lot of the other WWE games, so your mileage may vary on if you should play this on a harder difficulty or whatever the case may be for you. CPU here really depends on how you deal with the flow of each match. If you can get a good rhythm going, you can grapple your way to taking no damage at all, whereas other times you're going to get stomped trying to get even one grapple in. Some of it does come down to who gets which grapple off first or connects with their fists and kicks. I do know that the X button grapple is faster than the O grapple button, so I found at times it was beneficial to rush the CPU and keep performing X grapples, but I did find myself throwing regular strikes which would help interrupt my opponent long enough to get a stronger grapple in. Ultimately, if you're comfortable with other wrestling games, you should fit into this one, and I think the difficulty will be comparable to other games of the era. Still, a little bit of practice goes a long way, and once you kind of figure out how the controls work, I think you'll be okay. But if I'm being completely honest, at first I wasn't super jazzed with the way the game played, even its console counterparts, despite its over-the-top look and flair to the game, which I do love. I was expecting something a bit more arcadey and quicker paced in terms of its gameplay. However, the game did win me over, as eventually once I understood understood the deliberate nature of the moves and how the game controls, I still feel it scratches that itch of being both a competitive wrestling game with elements of a fighter, and it's a blast to play. So if you were looking for something that kind of fell in between a more simulation-based game and an arcade game, WWE All Stars in any of its iterations might be the game for you. As far as match types are concerned, you'll have access to one-on-one matches, tornado tags, cage matches, extreme rules, and eliminations. Sadly, there is no ladder matches or Royal Rumbles. One-on-one is self-explanatory. Go head-to-head with another wrestler and win by pinfall, submission, or depleting their health so much so that they quit. If the opponent's health is in the red and you perform a finisher, this will guarantee you a win by knocking out your opponent. The only exception is in cage matches. Tornado tag is in place of traditional tag team matches where all 4 participants are in the ring right away, and it's essentially a 2-on-2 match. Same winning stipulations apply here. Cage match, you need to escape the cage by beating your opponent up so much so that it gives you time to escape. At the top of the cage, you'll need to play a little mini game where you have to get the arrow in the line here. Complete this 5 times and you win the match. Meanwhile, your opponent can attempt to pull you off the cage and vice versa. However, you do not need to complete the mini game in one sitting. Thank God. So if you are knocked off the top of the cage, but already completed the mini game 3 times successfully, then those still count when you climb back up the cage to attempt and escape again. Extreme Rules is your hardcore match where you and your opponent are going to beat each other up with weapons or anything really, including moves. Finally, Elimination is either a triple threat or 4-man match where all competitors are facing against each other and each competitor can be eliminated via pinfall, submission, or knockout. Whoever's left after everyone's been eliminated wins the match. These can also be match types in tornado tag matches as well. All of these match types are playable via your standard exhibition mode, where the game allows you to play with the roster you've unlocked up to this point, but the other 2 single player modes are probably where you're going to head to once you've tried out the different game modes and kind of getting a feel for how this game plays.
Welcome! Oh, yes! Welcome to my funeral parlor! The doors are always open just for you!
Path of Champions is your arcade mode, where you'll compete in a series of 10 matches for a shot at championship gold in either singles competition or tag matches. I wanted to make sure I had a decent sampling here, so I tried both Undertaker and DX's route. There is also a route to take on Randy Orton if you decide to face him over the Undertaker. Now, quick spoiler, once you complete both the Undertaker and DX routes, there isn't any additional routes that you're able to partake in, so I'm not sure if these are the only 3 routes in the game. I do plan on going back to play that, so hopefully I do have an update that I can throw in this video whether or not there is any additional routes after the fact. So I'll play through it again, and if there is one, I'll just put a quick edit in here. And after successfully completing Randy Orton's route in Path of Champions with Ricky Steamboat, I can confirm that no, there isn't. Once you pick your route, you're met with an introduction cutscene against your eventual foes at the end of the road. You also do get additional cutscenes the further into the Path of Champions you go. These are all lower res cutscenes you can see on the console version, but still, I do really like these, and they offer a bit more in terms of that WWE feel, if that makes sense.
Welcome to the dark days of the WWE. You have made a fatal mistake. Seeking to challenge me? I do not make mistakes. I bury them.
Hunter, what are we doing here? It's WrestleMania, and these guys are good. I'm not sure we...
Sean, calm down. It's okay. I've got a plan.
You think you can take what's rightfully mine? You may have had some success along the way, but that means nothing to me. You mean nothing to me. The reality is, I'm not just going to beat you. I'm going to tear you apart, piece by piece. This isn't arrogance. This is destiny.
First, for Taker's route, I went with Bret Hart and completed the 10 matches leading up to Taker on the road to SummerSlam. I like the touch, whether intentional or not at this point, of not having you face Taker at WrestleMania, because at the time, Undertaker's WrestleMania streak wasn't broken yet. Still, surprisingly, there's more than just one-on-ones when going down the route, which I thought was cool. You'll get Fatal 4-Ways, Triple Threats, and Extreme Rules matches. The latter half of the 10 matches were relegated to one-on-ones with Stone Cold, Andre the Giant, The Rock, and Hulk Hogan before I was able to take on The Undertaker. Hogan was a steel cage match, while Austin was an Extreme Rules match. So I can appreciate the variety here in terms of game modes, but ultimately I just used the same tactics over and over to win. Taker was about as easy as everyone else was once I got the hang of the controls. But truth be told, the biggest hang up with the game is understanding how to play it. Once you do, it's easy to get a rhythm going and decimate your opponent in one-on-one matches like I talked about previously when it comes to facing your AI opponents. Overall, singles competition was decent and fits the bill for your standard arcade mode, albeit it's kind of funny after we win the World Heavyweight Championship, we get a scene of Bret celebrating with Taker's casket nearby. Meanwhile, JR on commentary states we beat Taker in his own signature match, although this was not a casket match, it was just a one-on-one bout. I'm guessing in the console version that this match with Taker is a casket match. But still, we've obtained the World Heavyweight Championship and new ring gear for the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be. Now it's time to challenge DX for the tag team titles. When traversing the DX path, I chose Randy Orton and Eddie Guerrero for my tag team. I wanted to make sure I played one route with a legend and a quote-unquote up-and-comer, and faced off against tag teams like Rock paired with Austin and Andre with Big Show, and you can imagine how much of a cluster that was to fight. But we eventually make it to DX after taking out the Brothers of Destruction, and we make short work of the current tag team champions to end story mode. I think overall these are pretty fun modes, especially if you enjoy the core mechanics here. Plus, you'll be able to try out all the different modes in the game, as you'll get one of each match type throughout one playthrough of Path of Champions, minus the cage match. At least on my route with DX, there wasn't a cage match to play through. The final thing to note here is that you do not need to complete the entire Path of Champions in one sitting. After completing a match, you can exit and return where you left off previously. Although keep in mind, if you start a new path before finishing the old, you will need to restart the whole thing from the beginning.
Snakes, cold-blooded predators, slithery, slimy demons, always on the attack. Their very appearance strikes fear in their prey. Their movements can be slow and hypnotic, or they can strike in an instant. Reptile or WWE Superstar.
Fantasy Warfare sees you take control of either a WWE Legend or at the time current roster / up-and-comers as you play a fantasy what-if style match. When clicking a match, we're given a monologue explaining the history of both wrestlers and what makes this fantasy match an interesting one. Keep in mind, kind of like the music, I'm not really able to show a lot of the video clips here. That's why I'm showing a lot of still images, which is a little bit of a hint. As someone who grew up watching the Attitude Era and started watching wrestling right at the tail end of the new generation, it's cool to see some of these classic wrestlers with these pseudo feuds, and I also do think it's nice that you get to choose who you'd rather see go over. That is, of course, if you can win the match. Here, you can also unlock some new characters, which is always a nice touch, seeing as a big chunk of the roster is locked from the beginning. On paper, I do think this is a really cool idea, but unfortunately, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more out of it. Maybe have a pseudo story mode with the character models, with some promos, or just something really. As it stands, you basically can get the same effect just selecting two characters in exhibition mode. The only real difference is that you won't get the cutscene at the beginning to explain this pseudo feud with stock footage provided by the WWE. It's a great idea, and if this game ever got a sequel, it would have been cool to see them expand on this to flesh it out a bit more. For what it is though, it does leave a bit to be desired, especially since once you play the match, there really is no reason to ever play it again. So once we move over to multiplayer, it is unfortunately a bit lacking in terms of options. We have your standard one-on-one bouts and cage matches, but that's it in terms of game types. Sadly, there isn't Extreme Rules or Tornado Tags available in multiplayer. It's just one-on-one, which is fine I suppose for what it is, but I think it would have been nice to be given the option to team up with a friend for Tornado Tag or something, but it is what it is. You do get the option to choose whether you want to use create a character wrestlers, which I think is nice, and your choice of up to 4 different arenas. Unfortunately, there's not much to say with this one. As always, I roped my brother XGP into playing this with me, and the multiplayer did not work for us. To be fair, we were utilizing the PPSSPP emulator, and it would not run more than the 4 frames you're seeing on screen right now at a time. We even tried utilizing our created characters, and the game itself wouldn't even get into a match. XGP stated that the game was so afraid of our created characters that it wouldn't load them up, and I gotta agree there. Urine-soaked Trunks Doink the Clown versus tiny-headed Hulk will not go down today, unfortunately. Still, for what it's worth, it could have been an internet issue on either of our parts, but if it did work correctly, I know it would have been about as good as the base game is, and I think that if you were to play this one with a friend, it would actually make it even better to play. I did just mention before that the game does feature a create a character mode where you can create a really cool wrestler or do like I did and create Doink the Clown after one too many Jaeger bombs. I'm not the best when it comes to these modes here, and I usually just mess around a bit. Still, it's not going to be Street Fighter 6 character creator by any means, but I think it does the job well enough, and you're able to use your create a character in all the different game modes available. On Metacritic, WWE All Stars received a 70 critically and a 7.8 user score, and honestly I think that's right on the money, as I gave it about a 7.4, so I went with a 7 on Metacritic. Although this is where I disagree with how Metacritic does its rating system, as I wouldn't consider this game a mixed rating, but a 7 be a positive in my opinion. Still, don't take the ratings too seriously, as it's just where I put it, and as always, use your own judgment and give something a shot, because you might have a differing opinion, especially when it comes to subjective things like this. Digressing here, but WWE All Stars still holds up very well even today. This is one of those situations where it's hard for me to separate this version from the console ports, so it does suffer a bit in that regard, as I'd recommend the console port first, but on its own merits, this game is awesome, and any fan of the WWE will enjoy it. But if you did want to play WWE All Stars on the PSP, I don't think that you would be making a bad decision. It's currently not super expensive at the time of writing if you're looking to pick up a physical copy of the game on handheld, and I would absolutely recommend it if you're going to choose that route. It's a little pricier for the console ports, but I still also think those are worth picking up if you can get it for a decent price. So what do you think? Is WWE All Stars on the PSP still worth playing today? Also, who do you think's taking the Rumble next year in Saudi Arabia? On the men's side, I'm thinking it's going to be Sammy this year to take it, since they've dropped so many hints about him wanting to be a champion that I think at this point they're going to have to pull the trigger. I don't know who they're going to face, but I mean, we'll see what happens there. Whereas on the women's side, for me, that's a bit of a wild card right now, so I'm just gonna go with either of my two faves, being Bailey or Io Sky, even though low-key I do kind of hope it's Bailey. Anyway, let me know in the comments below who you think should take the Rumble next year, and as always, thank you for stopping by.